taste the James Berry Late Copain from Paso Robles. So you've been down to the vineyard before. It's far west side Paso Robles, not that far from Hearst Castle. Definitely on the kind of the most western extreme of Paso Robles. So obviously there's a big difference with, I guess, the perception of Paso Robles being a warm area. It certainly is, but it's very different than east side versus west side, and certainly within the soils as well.
So how far is it from the ocean? Do we know?
Roughly about 20 miles, so not too bad.
And over there, when we visited, I noticed that on the west side, there's much higher proportions of, calcareous shale / limestone. So I guess tell me about the blend and how that soil type affects the blend.
We've had the conversation before about limestone in general from most of the great, wine growing regions, from Chablis to Burgundy and Barolo and Chateauneuf, where there's below all those galets, there's and some of the great vineyards has this layer of limestone that I think kind of seems to show through and kind of keeping the vibrancy of the wine, and particularly for us here, where it could go the other direction and kind of become this fat, flabby kind of wine. I think it kind of keeps it, gives it precision and kind of keeps the energy of the wine, as opposed to, again, where it could go. So, I mean, as you know, it's been we've vacillated back and forth on the percentages of, the blend. This year's, it's about 15% Syrah with kind of equal parts Grenache and Mourvèdre. We've tried, co-fermenting some of the Mourvèdre with the Grenache, and Syrah Mourvèdre and Syrah Grenache, and I think it's still, it's a work in progress to some extent to figure out, and given the vintage and what you can and can't do. I mean, it's certainly been the most challenging from that standpoint, because it is really the only blended varietal wine that we make for our vineyard designated wine. So it's I mean, you can see why I think the varietals work together with kind of the kind of leathery kind of aspect you get from the Mourvèdre, and the brighter fruit in the Grenache, and the Syrah kind of giving it, some tannin and structure. But it's
And we've always used a pretty modest, maybe I should say moderate amount of whole cluster with the wine. Not only with the Syrah, but also sometimes the Grenache and Mourvèdre. How does this blend, the 07 blend, differ in terms of whole cluster usage, and what have you kind of changed with the winemaking over the years?
I think it's just with the Syrah this year. I mean, I think the Grenache, we tried it. I think the first time we tried it, it got this great kind of aromatic floral component, but it also added a lot to the structure, made it for kind of lighten the color. And while there are these really pretty, beautiful Grenaches, trying to make something a little more, I guess, unctuous and kind of, I guess, pure, of like fruit driven, as opposed to other kind of tertiary things, from kind of letting the varietals do the work, as opposed to like what we use with the Syrahs, with looking for some other things with the stem inclusion. Just kind of let the varietal mix make up the complexity.
Sure.
At least in the short term. I mean, we're 1 year we try, and next year we learn something and keep moving forward. And
right.
It's on top of it, as we learn more, it's learning more with interacting with Justin, and he's obviously a great farmer, and I think that's, in general, people like him allow us to farm vineyards that are or source vineyards from different regions that we can't go see on a daily basis. It's a 5-hour trip to go down and see Justin. It doesn't make it, but he knows what he's doing. He knows the problem. I mean, it's never a conversation about like, oh, you need to drop this yield or do this, and things can be more vertical, or you never seem to have those dialogue. It's more just what the general feel and sense of the vintage is, and where he thinks things are going to come in, and so there's not a lot of tedious work that needs to be done with him.
Right. I mean, with him living on the property, it's always amazing to see his connection. When we're down there, because he's his house being perched up on top of the hill, up above all the grapes, he's basically having as intimate of a relationship with any vineyard that we have. Walking the vineyard with his dog all the time and checking out the different spots. It's couldn't be a better situation.
This wine seems like it needs some time to open up. It's interesting to see how it continues to evolve. I mean, some of the time I've gone back and tasted some of the earlier, like the 04, the Copain is one of these things where it seemed to kind of almost pick up some weight, but also some complexity, because the very first one was just equal parts Grenache and Mourvèdre. So again, that's kind of like the evolution is now, okay, add a little more Syrah. You added 5% the next year, and then 10, now it's 15, and trying to come up with that percentage. And then in amongst that, we're co-fermenting Grenache and Mourvèdre, and kind of this whole interplay. So it's
right,
a distinct way to kind of make it every year. Considering sometimes the Mourvèdre comes in late, it comes in earlier. It's been frosted, the Grenache is shattered. I mean, it's definitely a really challenging blend to make. It's fun to drink, and people enjoy it at the tasting room here, and those of you who buy it off the list. But it's certainly, it's not easy. It doesn't come easy.
Exactly. Well, I think also, we've over the years we've kind of changed some things in terms of how much was going into smaller 60-gallon barrels, but we've used the demi-muise, in the past, which obviously there's much less oxygen uptake through the barrel, and so the wine's aging a little bit slower. How do you feel that those larger barrels play into the wine? Or
I know that we've always kept the Grenache and the demi-muise, just with, I guess, the thought process of Grenache being kind of oxidative, potentially in some of the Syrah, like in smaller barrels. I think the big barrels, I think, why idealistic also kind of, I think, don't allow for the kind of early maturity, so to speak, in barrels,
right.
Say the Syrah, so sometimes it works better in the kind of neutral small barrels, and let the Grenache be in the big barrels along with the Mourvèdre. And I mean, again, that's still kind of, us figuring out. We've tried some of the co-fermented stuff and putting Grenache and Mourvèdre in just, regular 228-liter barrels, and I think we're, it's interesting also vintage-wise. I mean, it's
every year it changes.
Yeah, it seems like we're very inconsistent here, but anyways, needless to say, 2007 needs a little time. It's really tasty right now, but I think it should be good in 4 or 5 years here.